Um, for those of you who just joined or didn't hear me rambling on for the past 2 minutes, my name is Phil Sharon, and I am Executive Vice President at Think Company. If you don't know about Think Company, we are an experienced design consulting firm based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We also have a satellite office out in Denver, Colorado. And we work on various types of design projects for large organizations. We also have a technology team that builds the things that we design. This talk was originally planned to be part of a South by Southwest talk. Dhiraj and Neha were going to be going down there. And as we know, South by Southwest was canceled for the year. And it actually inspired us to take some of the folks who were speaking at South by Southwest and put them into a webinar series that we could do virtually for everyone who's under quarantine. So this is, I think, the 6th or 7th webinar that we've done since the company's gone under quarantine. We hope everyone is safe and healthy at home, and that all your loved ones are doing okay. But this is just something that we're trying to do to take place of all of the public speaking engagements that we do normally. So keep an eye out at our website, or follow us at Think Company through Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram, and see what other upcoming webinars we have going on. Speaking of which, we'll talk about 2 webinars that are coming up. One is, this is actually a workshop. I forgot to put a notification up here. It's sold out today. So there are no slots currently available, but we are building up a wait list. This is a 2-day virtual workshop. It's 2 hours each day from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern from May 5th to May 7th. I think that might be a typo there. I think it's a 2-day webinar, but anyway, I can clear that up later. But this is a virtual workshop. We're actually charging a $50 fee. It's a very small number of people that we will accept into the workshop, so that it can be a nice intimate gathering of folks to learn about content strategy. And we're not keeping the fees. We're just collecting it to make sure that the folks who are registered will be showing up. And those fees are going to COVID PHL, which is an organization to help quarantine-related issues going on in the Philadelphia area. David Dillon Thomas, our principal of content strategy, is also doing a webinar on May 14th from 3 to 4 p.m. It's a great talk that he delivers, that he's delivered out there publicly a couple of times. It's another South by Southwest talk that he was going to be doing. And it's about design for cognitive bias, using mental shortcuts for good instead of evil. It's a great talk. I've attended it a couple of times, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what Dave has added to the talk since then. We're going to get to the webinar in 1 second, so a couple of ground rules about that. Number 1, everyone in the webinar right now is muted by default. That's the way that the webinar platform works. We will be presenting, or Dhiraj and Neha will be presenting until around 3:45, at which point we'll open up live Q&A. We all have our calendars reserved until 4:30, so Q&A can go that long if folks want to stay. Sometimes we have a really lively Q&A session that goes that long, but we expect it to go at least until 4 o'clock, so please stick around for that. If you have questions during the talk, please post them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. There's a little thing that says Q&A, and click on that. Folks can also upvote questions. So if there's a question that someone else asked that you really want to get answered, then the more people that click on it, the more likely it is it will answer it. And I'll be monitoring Q&A, and we'll choose which questions for Q&A at the session at the end. So if I select your question and you are still logged in, I will unmute you and introduce you and see if you want to ask the panel. If you want to be anonymous, then we'll allow you to post those questions as an anonymous question, and then I'll just ask the question for you. So if you don't feel like getting online, or if you don't trust your microphone, then I can take care of that for you. Just to let everyone know, if we do get a lot of questions, we may not get to all of them, but we'll try. And there are also moderators that we have planted in chat and Q&A. So if there's anything going on, if you have any kind of issues that are going on, please feel free to engage us over there, and we'll try to resolve your issues. So without any further ado, I'd love to introduce Neha Agarwal and Dhiraj Sapkal. Neha is a design lead at Think Company. She's a designer, educator, and travel enthusiast whose interests blend design thinking, user experience, social innovation, leadership, and cultural exploration. Prior to Think, Neha served as associate professor and department chair of graphic design at La Roche College in Pittsburgh. She also remains active in the local community by serving on boards and giving talks, running workshops, and planning events through organizations like AIGA and the Design Activist Institute. Dhiraj is a senior experience designer at Think Company. He's a hybrid designer able to produce designs that are intuitive, beautiful, and accessible. He's adept at surfacing the user's needs by listening to and engaging with people and listening to those findings to drive rapid prototypes that can be tested and iterated upon to create rich interactive experiences. His strong passion for interaction design enables Dhiraj to create a meaningful and deliberate and animations and interactions that act to enhance the user's experience in a meaningful way. I was actually lucky enough to have been one of the reviewers of Dhiraj's graduate project before he started working at Think Company, and it was one of the most exciting presentations that were made at Philadelphia University that year. And I was really excited when he joined Think Company. So without any further ado, I'd love to introduce Dhiraj and Neha.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Give us a second while Dhiraj gets the slides up. Awesome. So again, thank you for joining. We're really excited to finally give this talk. As Phil mentioned, we were supposed to give it at South by Southwest, which obviously didn't happen. So yeah, we're excited today to talk to you about Mumbai's Dabbawalas. So I'm going to ask you to start out, just picture your typical morning. If it's anything like mine, you know, I rush around in the morning, I get to work, I usually make a cup of tea or coffee. I look at my to-do list, it's usually really, really long. As is my calendar, it's usually jam-packed. And so I start going about my morning, getting through, you know, all the various tasks and meetings that I need to get through. And usually around mid-morning, my stomach starts growling, but can't really do anything about it. And then before I know it, it's lunchtime and I get back to my desk and I realize, wow, I didn't pack lunch. I have a meeting soon. I don't have time to get lunch. And I realize I'm really, really hangry. And I'm sure this is something that we can all relate to. So now imagine instead that you went through your morning and when you arrived back at your desk at lunchtime, you had this beautiful home-cooked hot meal waiting for you. And this dream becomes a reality every single day for hundreds of thousands of people in Mumbai. And the Dabbawalas are the people behind it. And so what the Dabbawalas do is they pick up your hot home-cooked lunch from your house in the morning. They make sure that it's at your workplace by lunchtime. And they also pick it back up, the empty box, and they deliver it back to your house and it's there before you return home in the evening. So just to go over the language here, in Hindi, dabba means box, or in this context, lunchbox. Wala means person, hence Dabbawala is the person that brings you your lunchbox.
So before we went any further, we wanted to give you a little bit of context about like the history and culture around the Dabbawalas. The Dabbawala service, as we know it today, started in 1890. The story goes that there was a Parsi banker. He basically wanted somebody to go and fetch his home-cooked meal from his house, his lunchbox, and deliver it to his workplace during lunch. At that time, around like the railway stations, there were a lot of daily wage laborers. So he approached one of them and he paid this person a certain sum of money and just told him like, here's my address, go to my house, pick up my lunchbox and just deliver it to me at lunch. This person did that, and then he kept employing the same service from that person for a while. Over time, it got kind of popular, and a lot of people in his office as well started paying this person certain amount of money to go to their houses and bring their lunchbox to work as well. This person was named Mahadev Havaji Bache, and he was the first Dabbawala. As the popularity of this service sort of started growing and more requests started coming in, he realized he could start this as a business. And so with around 100 men, he started the Dabbawala service as we know it today. Today, there are around 5,000 Dabbawalas spread out across Mumbai, aged between 80 to 65. Usually when one becomes a Dabbawala, they're usually like 18 to 20. And once they get in and once they are a Dabbawala, they pretty much are a Dabbawala for life. Primarily, a majority of the Dabbawala workforce is illiterate. Some of them do know how to read and write, but a majority of them don't. And that is very crucial because they have designed a lot of services sort of around this limitation as well. And we will get to it in more detail. All in all, the Dabbawalas deliver around 130,000 dabbas every day. And as Neha pointed out, they pick up your dabba from your house, get it to your workplace, and then deliver it back to your home again. That amounts to 260,000 deliveries a day. And they do all this with an error rate of 1 in 16 million, which is equivalent to a Six Sigma certified operation. Most of the Dabbawalas hail from, I would go out and say all of the Dabbawalas hail from a region outside of Mumbai in Maharashtra called the Sahyadri Hills. And they are followers of Lord Vitthal. And one of his core tenets is that serving somebody food is in essence a service to God. And I want to read out this quote from the Dabbawalas. Quote, "We are getting a chance to walk the path of spirituality while earning our bread. Delivering food to office goers is like a service to God." And honestly, this is a very powerful mission statement, and it is the driving force behind the entire service of the Mumbai Dabbawalas. Now, I keep saying Mumbai Dabbawalas. That is because they are unique to Mumbai. This model has been, people have tried to replicate this model in other cities, but it's just not been successful. And a lot of it has to do with Mumbai and the way it's set up. Sorry about that. We're all working from home. So anyway, as I was saying, it's a product of the way Mumbai is set up. And that is because Mumbai has a population of around 25 million people. The way Mumbai was built is around the southern tip of Mumbai is a very dense city center. That is where most of the offices and businesses reside. So that means people from the suburbs have to travel a really long distance to get to the city center. And most of the people rely on railways to make that commute. The commutes are really long and the trains are really crowded. And I don't know if we have anyone from India or specifically Mumbai on the chat, but they can attest to this. Getting on a Virar fast during peak time is one of the most difficult experiences you will ever have. And that's just the nature of it. People do it every day. Apart from that, there are, I would say in most of India, eating out is not culturally in yet. And there are a lot of reasons behind that. Most offices might not have fully functioning cafeterias. Apart from that, kind of going outside to a restaurant every day makes it difficult to get healthy home food on a more consistent basis. Apart from that, there are also a lot of dietary restrictions that come into play because of societal, cultural, or religious preferences. And all of this means home-cooked meals it's what is generally preferred by a majority of the Indian population. Now, as I said, everybody relies on the Mumbai locals for their commutes. This is true. The Mumbai local is often called the lifeline of the city. And the day the Mumbai locals aren't working, the entire city just basically stops working. They run 2,342 trains daily. They carry around 7,500,000 travelers a day, which is almost equivalent to moving the entire population of New Zealand in one day. It's that many people. All of these trains run on a very tight schedule. You have trains every 2 or 3 minutes, but each train will only stop at a station for 40 seconds max. Some of the stations in the middle, you will only get a 20-second stop. So you have only 20 seconds to get on, get off, or get on a train.
Great. So now that Dhiraj told us a little bit about the history and the culture that surrounds the Dabbawalas, we want to bring it back to service design, since that's kind of the lens that we're looking through today. So I'm sure many of you that work in the design and the creative field are familiar with various definitions of service design, but for our purposes today, we're going to use this one. Dhiraj, if you'll flip the slide. Thank you. So this is a really great article on the Nielsen-Norman Group written by Sarah Gibbons, so you should definitely check it out if you get a chance. And she says that service design is the activity of planning and organizing a business's resources in order to, 1, directly improve the employee's experience, and 2, indirectly improve the customer experience. And so that's the lens that we're going to speak with you today. And so she also breaks down that there are 3 main components to service design, and that's all the people that are involved in a service, all the props, whether they be digital or analog or otherwise, and all the processes that go into it. And it's really important that when you're designing a service, you make sure that you coordinate each of the people, props, and processes across 2 main dimensions. And that's front stage and backstage. So front stage is everything that the customer or audience sees, and then backstage is everything that the customer doesn't see. And so we'll break this down in detail for the Dabbawala delivery service in a few minutes. But the important thing to remember here is you really have to focus on all those touch points, map those all out, and make sure that you're paying attention to them and how they're coordinated between front stage and backstage. And this is another good quote by Sarah Gibbons, excuse me. that says when backstage problems exist, they have front stage consequences. And I'm sure as customers and consumers, we can all relate to this. You know, I think of many times when I'm engaging with a service and I might log into the online portal and change my address and my contact info. And then let's say a little while later, I'll call them to ask them a question or maybe report an issue. And I realize that, oh, they don't have the same contact information anymore, right? And so I get frustrated. The rep on the phone is frustrated. It makes it hard for us to do whatever task we're there to do together that day. And I'm sure we can all relate to feeling like there's a problem as a customer. And usually those are, you know, have something to do with the backstage processes not being quite right. So just to look at the entire cycle that we'll walk you through today, as we said, it starts with picking up your dabba full of your home cooked meal in the morning from your house. And then Dhiraj will explain to you how they go through a couple series of sorting tasks at different train stations. They drop it off at your workplace, and then they do the whole thing in reverse again so that your dabba makes it back home before you do.
So today we're going to be following the journey of Nirali's dabba. Nirali works at a tech startup in Mumbai. She lives near Vilepali station and her office is near Narman Point. She uses the local trains every day, and that means she has about an hour of commute every day. Her work starts at 9. That means she has to leave her house at 8 in order to make it to work on time. Now, before, she used to pack her own lunch in the morning and carry it with her every day. But over time, she realized it was just very hectic. In order to like leave at 8 and to have her lunch packed and everything prepared, she had to wake up way early in the morning, cook everything, pack it all up. It would cause her delays a lot of times. So she decided to employ the services of the Dabbawalas. When it came to choosing the service, honestly, for Nirali, it was a no-brainer. And that was just because her father was also a subscriber to the service. So she kind of grew up knowing about the service and had an innate sense of trust already built into the service because he's seen firsthand the reliability, the speed, and the efficiency of the service. So when it came to picking the Mumbai Dabbawalas, it was almost a blind decision. So on our right, we have Subhash. He's our Dabbawala. He's 54 years old. He's a third generation Dabbawala, which is not uncommon for most Dabbawalas. This is, as I mentioned, once you're a Dabbawala for life. And it's also very generational in that once you're a Dabbawala, pretty much like the son would also follow in the same footsteps. So it's not uncommon to find second or third generation Dabbawala. So in case of Subhash, his father was a Dabbawala, as was his grandfather before him. So now we are going to follow the journey of Nirali's dabba and see how it makes it to her desk. So as I mentioned, work starts at 9. That means she has to leave for work at 8. So she's packed up, she's ready. She leaves the house, catches her train, and she's on her way to work. By around 9 p.m., Nirali's mother-in-law, she lives at home. So she's volunteered to sort of like make lunch for Nirali and her husband and pack it up and send it for them. And 9 o'clock is like a very convenient time for her as well. She has enough time. She's woken up. She has, had some time to relax, have a cup of chai. And then by 9 p.m., she starts prepping lunch. By around 9:30, she's done prepping lunch. And by this time, Subhash arrives at the house as well. Nirali's mother-in-law has packed up the lunch, it's ready. And this is our first sort of front stage touch point that we'll encounter because Subhash will always be there at 9:30 consistently every day. So it's a very reliable factor. It's something that Nirali's mother-in-law can rely on and sort of plan a schedule according to that. And so by 9:30, Subhash has picked up Nirali's dabba. And this is where we encounter our first backstage touch point. Subhash will ensure that Nirali's dabba has the appropriate code on it. And what this means is Neha will tell us a little bit about the Dabbawala coding system that they've developed.
Yeah, so the coding system is always on the top of the dabba, and it's super, super important. It's the thing that makes sure the right dabba goes to the right recipient and goes back to the right home. So if we look at the top center there, the W is the residential station code. So in this case, that means the station that is closest to Nirali's house. And if we move counterclockwise, You see the B, which is the residential street code, obviously Nirali Street. That also denotes the Dabbawala team color, which Dhiraj will explain in a minute. And then in the center, you see the destination station code. This CCG in this case stands for Churchgate. So Churchgate is the nearest train station to Nirali's work. And then the last piece you see on the right there, 9N2. 9 is the destination code, which actually stands for the bicycle that will deliver her final, the Dabba, which we'll tell you more about later. And then N2 is her building and her floor code.
Yep. Yeah, just take a look at this diagram, and I mean, don't try to memorize it, of course, but just take a look at it, because we're going to be referring to it as we sort of go through this process further. Anyway, it's 9:45 a.m. Subhash has ensured that Nirali's Dabba has the appropriate codes on it. And if this was sort of the first time he was picking up her delivery, this is the time he would actually go in and manually write down all those letters and symbols and everything onto the Dabba. And all of this is just to ensure that the Dabba will reach the intended recipient properly. So once the code has been applied and the Dabba is ready, Subhash will load it onto his bicycle, which is sort of the primary means of transport that the Dabbawalas use.
Yeah, and so bikes are really important to the Dabbawalas for two reasons. Number one, they're really low cost in terms of upkeep and maintenance. So if you would think about, let's say, a scooter or motorcycle, that would obviously cost a lot more. The other reason is because while you might think a motorcycle or scooter would maybe make for a faster delivery, they don't in a crowded place like Mumbai. And the streets are really crowded, the traffic patterns are kind of crazy. And so the bike is what allows a Dabbawala to be super agile and nimble. It allows them also to maybe skirt around some traffic rules every now and then, which, because the Dabbawalas are so highly regarded in Mumbai, people don't seem to mind if they do.
All right, so Subhash has Nirali's Dabba loaded onto his bike. He's ready to go. He's going to make his usual morning delivery route. Sorry, it's a pickup route. So this is already pre-planned, and it's sort of like a set schedule he has. He'll go around each of those houses, picking up all of these Dabbas, making sure they have the right codes on them, adding them to his bicycle. And in the end, when he's done with his entire route, he'll have around, I guess, 25 to 30 Dabbas loaded up on an average on his bicycle. And once he's picked everything up, he'll make his way towards Ville Parle station, which is sort of the nearest station to Nirali's house. And this is where we sort of encounter another backstage process which relates to sorting. Before we get into that though, I wanted to talk a little bit about how the Dabbawalas are organized. Most of the Dabbawalas are organized into teams. Each team consists of around 20 to 25 Dabbawalas. And so there are around 800 Dabbawala teams across Mumbai. Each team usually has some sort of color code associated with it. So for instance, Ville Parle station might have 3 teams operating out of it, Team Blue, Team Orange, and Team Maroon. Along with that, actually, and this is interesting, each team of 20 to 25 Dabbawalas will have every day 5 Dabbawalas on hand as a contingency measure. Again, this is just to account for any sort of unforeseen circumstances or events that may happen. These extra Dabbawalas will have with them extra pallets, extra bicycles, and extra cell phones. This is sort of like a buffer that's built into the system to account for any sort of unforeseen events that may happen. For instance, a Dabbawala's bicycle might get a flat tire, so they have spare bicycles on hand. They might have an additional load of Dabbas that day. They might have a new customer that was added in, and there was a delay maybe in picking up the Dabba or maybe in adding the code. So these Dabbawalas are there to sort of pick up that slack and make sure that the Dabba is properly integrated into the system and the entire system works like a well-oiled machine. Now, normally, all of these teams, they sort of engage in friendly competition with each other. Each of them, they're trying to expand their revenue sources. They're trying to expand their customer base. They're trying to grow deeper, meaningful relationships with their customers. But when it comes to like 10:30 a.m. till 2:30 p.m., which is sort of their main delivery window, all of these teams will come together and work as one team to sort of unleash the logistical prowess of the Dabbawalas and ensure that every delivery is made on time every day. All right, so with that little sidetrack out of the way, we're back to our journey. It's 10:30 a.m. We are at our next backstage touch point, which is sorting. Now, there are around 60 railway stations across Mumbai, and the Dabbawala serve all 60 stations. There is no central sorting hub as such. Sorting happens at every station individually at the same time. And the Dabbawalas serve every station from each sort of origin station. What that means is when Subhash arrives at Vileparle station, he will see 60 pallets and 60 Dabbawalas, each with an intended destination, each headed towards one of the 60 stations across Mumbai. Now, as I said, each pallet will be labeled based on its intended final destination. And in our case, actually, once Subhash arrives at Vileparle station, his next job is to actually carry the pallet that's intended to go towards Dadar station. There's another Dabbawala who's carrying the pallet that's going towards Churchgate station. And there's a third Dabbawala who's, for instance, carrying a pallet going towards Bandra station. Now, what happens is if you go back to sort of the code that we had seen, at the center of it was the destination station code. That actually correlates with each of the destination stations on the pallet. So our Dabbawala will actually look at Nirali's Dabba, see the code that's on it, and will then move it to the appropriate pallet. Similarly, every other Dabbawala will do the same. They will look at the code at the center of their Dabba and put it in the appropriate pallet. Now, the responsibility of carrying this Dabba is handed over to our second Dabbawala. Note, there is this innate sense of trust and camaraderie between the Dabbawalas, where Subhash is trusting this other Dabbawala to ensure that his customer's Dabba is always delivered on time and it always goes to the right person and not somebody else. So again, this is another part of the process that they have built in a very deep sense of trust and camaraderie between each other.
Yeah, and here's some photos just to give you an idea of what that sorting process looks like. So you can see there's a lot of carts, or pallets, excuse me, a lot of dabbas. Everything is moving very quickly. It's a crowded Mumbai train station. So they work like pit crew essentially. And like we mentioned before, they have anywhere from 20 to 40 seconds to load all these dabbas on the appropriate train. So it's a pretty impressive operation.
All right, so we're back to our journey. It's 10:40 a.m. All the dabbas have been sorted. Nirali's dabba is now on the pallet that's intended towards to go to Churchgate. So our dabbawala will get on the platform, wait for a train headed towards Churchgate, get on it. Again, as Neha mentioned, he has only 20 seconds to load this dabba into the train, and then he will carry it all the way towards Churchgate. It'll take him about an hour to get there. So by around 11:50 a.m., he will arrive at Churchgate station. Now, once he reaches Churchgate station, what he will see is literally an army of bicycles waiting for him. There'll be around 60 to 70 bikes on average. And again, this completely varies based on the number of dabbas that a station receives and the number of locations that it is servicing. But each of these bikes will have a number associated with it. So for instance, if you have 60 bikes at Churchgate, there will be a bike 1 and there'll be a bike 60 and all the bikes in between. Here too, they have sort of contingency measures built in. They'll always have extra bikes on hand along with extra Dabbawalas to operate those bicycles. And again, this is just in an effort to account for any unforeseen circumstances or events that may arise. Again, an increase in frequency of dabbas, of a flat tire, or something like that. So now if you go back to sort of the code that we had shown you, at the destination station code on Nirali's dabba, there was a number 9 on it. What that means is our Dabbawala has to basically pick up that dabba and go put it on the bicycle with the number 9 on it. So all the Dabbawalas that arrived at Churchgate station who have the number 9 on their dabba will go and place their dabbas on the appropriate bicycle. And similarly, again, this is another sorting sort of backstage touch point that's taking place where all the dabbas are sorted on the appropriate bicycles.
So here's a photo of the sorting at the destination station. The photo on the left actually happens to be in front of Churchgate station. And while we did say that bikes are the primary mode of transportation, they do use sometimes these hand carts. And while the bikes, again, are speedy and nimble, they don't hold as many dabbas. So sometimes they'll load them onto these hand carts, which are slower. But if they need to deliver more in an area that doesn't have, as crazy traffic, they'll use the hand carts instead.
So it's 12 p.m. It's getting close to lunch. Lunch is at 1, by the way, in India. So our Dabbawala is ready. He has around 25 to 30 dabbas, maybe 35 sometimes, dabbas loaded onto his bicycle. And now he's going to go on his pre-planned route. And now he's going to refer to sort of the last 2 numbers on the destination station code. What that tells him is actually what building the dabba needs to go at, and at the same time, what floor it needs to be dropped on. So he will go through his entire, and usually again, this route is pre-planned. They've gone through it hundreds of times. They know the route, they know what sequence is most efficient to drop those dabbas in. And so our Dabbawala will go along his route, making all of his deliveries until by around 12:35, he reaches Nirali's office building. He checks the code. I mean, honestly, he doesn't check the code. He already knows where it's supposed to go. So he will just go to that floor. He will drop the dabba off and he will leave. And what that means is come lunchtime, Nirali has a hot, delicious, fresh, home-cooked lunch waiting for her. Now, once lunchtime is done, all Nirali has to do is just pack up her empty dabba, zip it all up, put it back where she found it. And this sort of 1 hour buffer window, it gives the Dabbawala some time to relax, to stretch their legs. Maybe they might go and have their own lunch as well. Because once it's 2 o'clock again, the entire cycle repeats and they pick up the dabba from Nirali's office and will carry it all the way to her house. And this entire delivery happens before even Nirali reaches her house. So that when she goes back to her house, her dabba is waiting, it's ready for another day.
So obviously that was quite the journey. It's really intricate and there's a lot of pieces and parts there. So that was focusing on the backstage portion of the delivery itself, but we also wanted to give you a peek in some of the backstage operations beyond the delivery cycle. So the Dabbawalas have a fairly flat organizational structure. So they have a president, a VP, a secretary, and a treasurer. And then they have about 9-ish directors and 800 group leaders that all lead the 5,000 or so Dabbawalas. So you can see that it's fairly flat. Their executive leadership is only about, I guess that would be about 15 people. And everybody is a shareholder, meaning everybody pays into the trust, which also means that everybody from the president onward delivers a dabba. And leadership is rotational. Anybody can, work at any level. Sometimes it's based on experience and expertise. And the groups generally self-govern. So while the leadership team is there for oversight, keeping track of the books, making sure there's no large problems, by and large, the teams themselves govern themselves. And so Subhash, for example, when he collects his fee from Nirali's mother-in-law, he'll also make sure that he's solidifying the relationship with her. So he'll talk to her, he'll ask her if, how life is going. He'll ask her if any thing could go better in his service, if she has any feedback. And so he'll take his feedback and he'll take that income back to the group leaders, who'll meet regularly, and they'll pool all the income together. They'll deduct all their operational expenses, and then they'll distribute wages from there. And then at that time, they'll also pull together all the feedback and any disputes and address those collectively as well. And so the Dabbawalas also adhere to some pretty strict policies. Honesty, timeliness, and cleanliness are of the utmost importance. Obviously, that's what makes their service so high quality, so accurate, so efficient. But they also have fines for certain things. So if a Dabbawala is caught not wearing his cap, that's like the signifier, the main uniform item for a Dabbawala, he can be fined. Same with if he's caught drinking on duty, or being absent without telling one of his group leaders, or being caught without a valid ID on him. And then of course he can be fined if there's repeated client complaints. So you can see that it's a really well-oiled, tight-knit, disciplined machine that they run. So to bring it back to service design, we wanted to take you through some takeaways. And really think about this, whether you're designing an entire service end to end, or you're designing just a few touch points between that service cycle, we think there's a lot you can learn from the Dabbawalas. So the first thing would be to focus on the fundamentals, right? So things like your business plan, your organizational structure. In the case of the Dabbawalas, their logistics and supply chain is really, really important. But really they're focusing on their core offering, right? And they're not getting too distracted by much else. So their core offering is making sure that your lunch goes to you and comes back to you. And they've focused everything around making sure that that portion is just perfect. It also helps to share organizational power, because what that means is everybody has a stake in the organization's success, which you can see, you know, in the case of the Dabbawalas, really helps keep their motivation high. We've already talked about make sure you're considering all those touch points. And let's say if you're not in charge of designing the entire service cycle, but maybe just a couple of points in between, see if you can do the research and get the information as to, well, you know, what touch point comes before and after the one you're designing, because that's how you make sure those things work together seamlessly. And then make sure that you're taking the time to establish, document, and uphold some standards. I know we've all probably experienced as creatives when our design tasks increase in complexity, something goes wrong or something's different, and all of a sudden we don't have established standards or policies to fall back on, and you know, everything unravels pretty quickly after that. And then the other thing is you want to make sure you're investing in a lot of training. Like we said, the Dabbawalas all come from a similar region, and they're generally Dabbawalas for life. And so that means that they have a long time and a long interest in trying to really hone their skills, which is really, really important to the quality of their service. And then in addition to that, you want to make sure you're building in buffers. As we saw, the Dabbawalas have backup Dabbawalas, extra cell phones, extra pallets, extra bikes. Make sure you're anticipating what can go wrong at the touch point, between the touch points, so you have all your bases covered. And then I think the most important thing here that we can learn from them is making sure with your employees and your team members that you're cultivating deep camaraderie, expertise, and collaboration, because that's sort of the connective tissue that's going to make sure that your service cycle works smoothly. And so we kind of already talked about this, but make sure you're thinking holistically across the people, the props, and the processes, both front stage and backstage, and really commit to getting all those pieces and parts working in harmony. So here's another quote by Sarah Gibbons. It says that an organization's backstage processes have as much, if not more, impact on the overall user experience as the visible points of interaction that the user encounters. And when you think of the Dabbawalas, right, there's really only two main front stage points of interaction, right? It's where the dabba is picked up and dropped off, but you can see all the complexity and intricacy that goes into the backstage processes. And if those weren't just right, the whole thing would fall apart and there would definitely be some front stage problems.
So looking ahead, for the longest time since the Dabbawala service has existed, the price or the fee that they charge for the service has been fairly reasonable. I would say, in fact, they undercharge for a lot of their service. And this is actually by design. Their Dabbawala service is used by everyone from like the CEO of a company to your security guard. And this is what they intend to do. They want the service to be open and accessible to all. As we said, based on that mission statement, it's not just a means of earning bread for them. It's actually a very spiritual experience for them to be able to serve food and to deliver food to these people. And so naturally, they've tried to look for different avenues they could explore to try and expand their revenue streams. So they've offered a couple of new options that people can actually engage with the Dabbawalas. For instance, they have a program called A Day with Dabbawala. And what that means is you could sign up to follow one of these Dabbawalas from pickup up till delivery and back again to see sort of firsthand all the intricacies, that go into the entire process, all of their logistical expertise. And it's quite an interesting experience too, because you get to learn a lot, especially witnessing it firsthand. Along with that, they also engage with the community by giving a lot of talks and seminars, both in India and across the world, at various companies and management institutions. They basically are trying to share their expertise, their management expertise, their logistical expertise, and just everything about their service that they have developed and tweaked over their 126-year existence. They have also started partnerships with companies where companies could pay them for carrying their logos or their insignias on their uniforms. So it's just another means of advertisement and revenue that they generate. Along with that, and this is very interesting, they've also started partnerships with a lot of kitchens. Now, a lot of people in Mumbai, especially the younger people, are mainly migrants who have come from different states across India, whether it be for education or for a job. And what that means is they're living very far away from their families, and they may not necessarily have anybody at home to cook food for them. And so it becomes very difficult for them to be able to sort of sustain a healthy diet and eat healthy food consistently. So what the Dabbawalas do is they work with kitchens that provide sort of home cooked healthy meals for these people, and they connect them with those kitchens so that instead of the dabba being picked up from your house, it's picked up by from one of these kitchens and is delivered straight from you. What this has also led to is it has created a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities for stay-at-home moms and just women in general who did not have access to the workforce before. They are able to set up their own kitchens, their own businesses, and sort of earn a kind of financial independence for themselves. So not only are they sort of doing their regular service, they're also trying to give back to society in a way. And speaking of giving back to society, they've also started food sharing partnerships. And what that means is you could sign up for one of these services by packing your dabba at home and putting a sticker on it that says food sharing, that you want this dabba to participate in the food sharing partnerships. What that means is the Dabbawala would pick up the dabba from your house, but instead of it going to somebody in an office, they would take that dabba and they would distribute it amongst people who need the food. So while initially our talk for South by Southwest was titled Tech-Free Service Design, where we were focusing mainly on the analog tech-free aspects of their service, we did some more research between that time and now, and we saw that the Dabbawalas have actually taken small incremental steps to try and embrace digital technology into their process. For instance, they have a website that gives you a lot of information about the Dabbawalas, as well as the ability to sign up for their service. Along with that, they've also started an SMS contact service where it makes it easy to sign up for the Dabbawala service by simply sending an SMS along with your details, and then somebody will reach out to you and sort of get you integrated into the system. They've also started digital doorstep registration, where a Dabbawala would basically come to your house with a tablet or an iPad and register you for the service on the spot, replacing their old paper agreement with a digital one. And all of this is just in an effort to embrace technology and to make their service more accessible to everybody. However, a large part of their service is still analog, and I think would still remain analog for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and so I'm guessing most of you are thinking, well, what about some of these tech companies, that also do food delivery? Are they trying to usurp the Dabbawala system? And the answer is yes, they are. But the answer is also that so far nobody has succeeded in doing that, and it's because of a few reasons. So number one, it's a very low cost, high performing service, as Dhiraj explained. They want to make sure that the cost stays low so that anybody from a CEO to a restaurant worker can use these services. So that's really hard for these new companies to compete with. It's also hard for them to compete with the extremely deep domain knowledge and tight-knit community that the Dabbawalas have. That takes a long time to cultivate within a company. And as does the intricate knowledge of Mumbai's roads and transit systems, all their sidewalks and little alleyways. There's actually a story that we encountered with one of the tech companies that was really trying to make it so that Google Maps could do the same job and help their delivery people navigate Mumbai with the same speed and efficiency as a Dabbawala. But what they realized, and they admitted it, was that Google Maps information could never be as real time or as accurate as the data that the Dabbawalas hold in their brains. And then the last three differentiating factors are, number one, that the Dabbawalas serve home-cooked food to your workplace, right? Whereas all these other services, they serve restaurant food to your workplace, your home, or wherever. So the Dabbawalas still have a hold on that cultural preference for home-cooked food at lunch. And because of that, and because of their accuracy, they have a really unwavering, trust from their customers that, again, takes years to cultivate and build. And then of course there's their mission, right? They have this purpose-driven mission, which means that their employees are really, really dedicated. And all of that's really, really hard to compete with. And so here's a quote by the coordinator of the Dabbawalas that says, "New companies give their customers good offers, but they're just interested in capturing the market. The Dabbawalas have a deeper reason for doing it, which is serving their customers is like serving their God." So that's obviously a pretty hard mission to compete with. So to wrap up here, obviously we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the state that we're all facing right now in this global pandemic. And the Dabbawalas do really have an uncertain future right now. They've had to suspend their services. And Dhiraj is gonna talk more to that since he's a Mumbai native.
Yeah, thank you, Neha. So being from Mumbai, I can attest 100% that the Dabbawalas are truly an icon of Mumbai. More often than not, the Mumbai Railways is often called the lifeline of Mumbai. And if that was the case, I would say the Dabbawalas are pretty much the proteins, carbohydrates, and fats of Mumbai, in the sense that they are essential to the operation of Mumbai as well. And honestly, they really do encompass the spirit. They embody, I would say, the spirit of Mumbai and Mumbaikars, in that they will persevere even in the face of hardships. I remember back when Mumbai was dealing with one of its worst floods in decades, and all railway services had to be suspended. People were stuck, unable to get to their houses. The Dabbawala still went out and they tried to do whatever they could to help people who were in need. And the moment the railways resumed their services and their operations again, the Dabbawalas were back at it, delivering their lunches. In fact, you can see in the picture on the left, that's a Dabbawala pushing a cart through a flooded street in Mumbai. And again, it goes back to their mission statement. It's not just a job. It's not just a means of earning bread. It's actually a very spiritual experience for them to be able to do this too. And with the whole global pandemic and the COVID-19 situation in India, this is an unprecedented situation for them. They've had to shut down their operations for the past 1 month. And that's mainly because India has been on a lockdown for the past 3 weeks, coming up to 4 weeks now. And this is the longest time they've ever had to disrupt their services. And honestly, nobody across the world, none of us know when this thing is going to end. And neither do the Dabbawalas. They are uncertain about their future. Even before the lockdown was initiated, some of the Dabbawalas did manage to go back. As I said, they are migrant workers that have come to Mumbai for their jobs. They did manage to go back to their villages and their homes, but there are a lot of Dabbawalas who are still stuck in Mumbai, and they are hurting. They are unable to manage even 2 meals a day. Now, while the government has taken some steps to try and ease the burden for some of these daily wage and migrant workers, they're still fairly uncertain about if they're even going to get a salary for May. They're probably not going to, because we don't know when this lockdown is going to end. And even thinking beyond that, once this global pandemic is over and we all emerge out of it into our new normal, the Dabbawalas are aware that some of their practices are going to have to change, especially considering, think about it. I'm going to be honest with you. I never used to wash my hands for 20 seconds. This is like a new thing, but now I'm doing it all the time, every time. And everybody is sort of more aware about hygiene and just some of these things like that. And considering the Dabbawala service involves the Dabba changing hands so many times and passing between so many people, they're pretty sure that some of these practices are going to have to change. And all that means is their future is very uncertain.
Yeah, and when we were doing research to find out what their current state is, we came across this SOS message that they sent on WhatsApp. And they say that there are 5,000 of us, and we have always enjoyed a wonderful relationship with the city. We're not expecting much, but every small effort counts in times of crisis, and the city always takes care of its own. So you can see in their call for help, they're also invoking the pride that they feel in Mumbai and the love that they feel for Mumbai. And to that end, we know that there's so many good causes to donate to, so we totally understand that. But if you can find it in your hearts and you can spare a little bit, if you do go to the Dabbawala website, which I think, Phil, maybe we can put that in the chat or email it to the registrants later. You'll see in the navigation, they have a donate button on the top right. Right now, the only way to donate to the Dabbawalas online is via bank transfer. So we know for those of us that are international, that might be a little tricky, but Dhiraj and I did look up and do some research, and we tried TransferWise ourselves, and it's a very secure and reliable service. They have good exchange rates. They don't charge any fees on top of that. So if you can find it in your hearts to, give back a little bit, that would be really great. We learned so much from them. Hopefully you have too.
We want to give a special shout out to Mr. Raghunath Megde. He is the former president of the Nutan Mumbai Tiffin Box Suppliers Trust, and I had the absolute pleasure of sitting down and having a conversation with him over a cup of chai when I was in India in December. He gave me a lot of information on the Dabbawalas. A lot of it we've shared with you today, and so we just want to thank him for all of his help. Along with that, I also want to thank my dear friend Nirali. She is an actual subscriber of the Dabbawala service, so rest assured all of the information we gave you, it was not some fake made-up persona. It was actually Nirali's first-hand experience, and so we just want to thank her for like sitting down with me and like giving us all of this information. So thank you, Nirali and Mr. Megde. And with that, I guess we hand it over to Phil for any questions that you may have.
Wow. I have so many questions, and this is not, it's not my opportunity to ask questions here. So there's quite a few questions in Q&A. So I'm gonna jump over there. But I mean, the one big observation that I want to make from this talk and from the conversations that I've had is like, what better example of the power of a good shared mission than this like low failure rate, almost completely analog process that you talked about. That's the one big thing that always comes through to me when Neha, when you and I would talk about this, and
Yeah.
And it through this presentation, it just really struck me hard. So I don't want to dig deep into that and take away time from all the folks who are asking questions here. So I'm going to first I'm going to jump over to someone that you both know.
Oh no. Here
Karen. Karen has a question.
Hi, Karen.
So, Karen, you've been unmuted. Let me know if you if it's
Hi.
working. There
Does
she
it
is.
work?
Hello, Karen. You're
Hey.
live.
Ooh. Hi, Neha. Hi, Dhiraj. I'm so glad
Hi,
I could
Karen.
listen to this South by talk that I know
Yeah,
you've
thank
been
you for
working on.
coming.
I wrote in 2 questions, and I actually stopped myself from writing in like 5 more because I too, like Phil, found this like so fascinating, and every step of the way I was like, oh, what about this thing? What about this thing? Early on in the talk, you were talking about the low error rate. It was like in the percentage points in, millions of deliveries. And I'm just curious, like when an error does occur, how do they rectify that? How do they measure the error rate? Like who would report these errors? Who would they get reported to? Like many questions in there, but just all around kind of what happens when the ultimate mistake does occur.
Yeah, Dhiraj, I'm gonna let you answer that since you talked to Nirali so much.
All right, sure. Yeah. So that is actually a very good question. So the thing is, while error rates are very low, errors do happen, and that's just because of the sheer number of transactions that they have daily. Again, these errors are very few and far in between. But when they do happen, they usually go and they try to talk to the customers every day. Every day after they deliver the dabba, they usually have they just take 5 minutes to like talk to the customer and get any sort of feedback. So if there was any issue with the delivery or something did not sit quite right with them, they will obviously they apologize, and they definitely try to like be more careful the next time. However, if the same mistake is repeated a couple of times, that's when sort of their organizational structure comes in. The people who are governing sort of majority of the teams, they will step in and they will be like, okay, you're clearly having some issues with this Dabbawala. They will try to swap that person out with a new Dabbawala, and they will closely try to monitor the situation to see if any such errors are happening again. And again, it goes back to the whole governance model they have about strict discipline and the fines and stuff that they enforce on Dabbawala. So I'm guessing if there is, they will definitely try to investigate and get to the root of it. Where did the mistake happen? Was it sorted into the wrong pallet? Was it delivered to the wrong person? Was it just handled very carelessly? And whoever the Dabbawala is, or whoever the offender may be, if they have sort of like a repeat, I would say if they have repeat errors or like issues like that, they're quite harsh about that. They can even just say, okay, sorry, you can't be a Dabbawala anymore because like we
Wow.
have these strict standards that you need to adhere to. Yeah, that was quite shocking to me too. Like Mr. Megde was like, okay, if you can't make it as a Dabbawala, then we can't keep you. So again, it just goes back to those strict standards of discipline that they enforce throughout their process, and that constant feedback that they generate by talking to their customers.
Yeah, to that end, they also hold their customers accountable. We didn't really go into it in the presentation, but we were reading a lot about, Nirali's mother-in-law has to make sure she has the dabba ready for the Dabbawala to pick up at a certain time every day. And we were reading a lot about like, you don't get many chances as a customer to get the dabba there on time. So the customers are expected to, really uphold that standard, because obviously it throws off their whole operation if the dabba's not there on time.
Yeah. Plus,
Wow.
even if sometimes things can happen, like, and this is really true. Sometimes the dabbas get stolen as well. In which case, then that's also an error. Like, obviously, the person is not getting a delivery, so they will obviously try to talk to the customer about it, try to explain the situation. If not, they will compensate the customer for that expense or that error. And all of this is taken into account when all of the team leaders meet. And they pool in all of their money. They subtract all of these expenses, like any fines that they had to pay, any replacement reimbursements that they had to give. So all of it is really tracked, and in their sort of registers that they carry, everything is accounted for.
It's amazing.
That's great. Hey, Karen, since you're unmuted, why don't you hit your second question?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a corollary, and Neha, it sounds like there's sort of a collaboration going on between the customer and the Dabbawalas. But my second question was about, is there like a required standardized size for the tiffin, for the dabbas, for the lunch boxes? Can your like lunch get rejected if it doesn't meet standards for, it looked like the containers they had were pretty specific sizes. So I guess a little bit more about the role that the customer has to play would be awesome to hear about.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Karen. You're absolutely right. We wanted to talk about that, and then we were like, oh, we don't have time to put all this in the presentation. So I'm glad you asked the question. But yeah, your observation was spot on. All the dabbas are basically this metal stackable lunchbox, essentially. I think you can buy them now here too. And then usually that stackable situation goes inside a larger container, which is the ones you were seeing in the presentation. And then sometimes folks will also put that inside yet another sort of like zip up pouch or something. But that core container has to be generally that same shape and size to make sure that they can all stack up properly, because again, any inconsistency, any deviation from the standard is just going to add time and add, more error, or sorry, more margin for error.
Yeah, and to that point too, initially I think they had a very strict standard of like how the dabbas, how the shape should be, and that's just so they could efficiently stack it on their pallets, because again, they only have 20 seconds to load that entire pallet onto the train and get on themselves. So they had to sort of, now they've become a little more lax in terms of, okay, you can have dabbas of like different shapes, but still they try to ensure that, make sure it's not like a weird shape like a star or a sphere or something, like something that's at least stackable. Yeah. However, even in terms of, and this is actually interesting because it happened with Nirali's dabba. She had like a little handle on her bag, and I think on the first day when they returned the bag to her, the strap of that handle had broken, and the Dabbawala was just straight up honest with her. They were like, "Listen, we handle the dabbas like in a very rough manner, so please give us like a more robust kind of thing that we can carry." So yeah, it's like a combination of both the customer and the Dabbawala working together to sort of enforce that standard.
Hey, thanks for your questions, Karen. I'm gonna jump over to Mary Beth. She's asked she had two questions, but the second question was, I had a whole bunch of questions lined up, and you answered them all. So I'm gonna unmute Mary Beth and see if she wants to ask her others. Whoa, I can't unmute her. Oh, here we go. Mary Beth, I think you're live.
Hi.
Hi, Mary Beth.
So amazing presentation. Thank you so much. So I had more of a cultural question, and Neha, we know each other, so this question shouldn't surprise you that I'm asking, but is there any talk of diversifying the workforce to include women?
It's a very, very good question. Yeah. So they tend to be mostly males, and all males from a specific area. And when Dhiraj and I were doing, our initial presentation outline for South by Southwest, we originally, the part that we switched out for the COVID information now, that would have been some of what you're getting at. And it's interesting because I guess it's sort of a catch-22, right? Because they don't have a diverse workforce, which in modern times seems like a negative. And yet that homogeneity, that's a hard word to say, is also probably something that attributes to their consistency. So I don't know, Dhiraj, if you have more thoughts on that, but we didn't get an indication that they're trying to diversify their workforce so much as those expanded offerings with kitchen partnerships of the like might expand it a little bit, but we didn't find that in our research.
Yeah, and even through my conversations with Mr. McDay too, we didn't really get an indication that they were looking at diversifying their workforce. And you were right, Neha, it's both a positive and a negative, because they hail from the same sort of region, and they all belong to sort of the same community. They know each other really well. They've been at each other's weddings and all family weddings. They know everybody in each other's family. And so that's, again, something that adds to that sense of camaraderie and trust, because these aren't just colleagues anymore. They're almost family that you're working with. At the same time, because there is a lack of diversity, change is also very slow to come by. And yeah, we do not know about that, if they are looking at sort of diversifying their workforce. However, it is interesting, especially that all of these kitchen partnerships that they are developing, it is sort of a side way that they are sort of getting women, especially into the entire service, by helping them sort of become entrepreneurs and set up their own kitchens. But in terms of delivery, I don't think they're doing that yet, or they have plans for that.
And there's no external pressure that you've heard of to do so?
Not that we've heard of. I mean, I think the cultural implications probably go beyond even the Dabbawalas, right? So everybody uses the train, but at the same time, and maybe this because I'm an Indian American woman, I'm not sure. I don't know that I would feel comfortable being the first female Dabbawala on a Mumbai train. I mean, I think it would be safe, but I don't know that I would feel as safe as all the men on the train do. So I think, that's tied to just some larger norms as well.
And I wonder, I think, Dhiraj, you mentioned that they all have the same spiritual leader.
Yes.
I wonder if that contributes at all to the lack of diversity too, because if they're all sort of practitioners of the same, the same sect of their faith, then is there any influence that has on how they're organized?
It probably does. That's also probably how one gets to be a Dabbawala too. It's usually a reference, somebody knows someone who's oh, this is my nephew, he wants to be a Dabbawala as well. So most of, I would say, the recruitment is sort of within that community as well. And again, it's both a positive and a negative. It helps them operate more efficiently, that is true, but it's also sort of slowing down any changes that they could implement into their service. They've been doing a lot of their entire process. They've only made very small incremental tweaks to their process, but the overall sort of structure of blueprint of their process has remained fairly consistent since it was started in 1890. So yeah.
Great. Well, I have another, thank you, Mary Beth, by the way, for your question. I have a question from another familiar voice. So I'm going to give him Sujan.
Sujan.
Nice.
Wait, Sujan, are you on?
Hey, yeah,
there he
I'm
is. Hey,
Hey.
Sujan.
How you doing?
Hello.
Hey, awesome talk. It's really great to hear all about the Dabbawalas. The question that I have is, whenever a new Dabbawala joins the program, what kind of impact does it have on existing Dabbawalas, mainly the routes or the customers and everything in between?
Right. Neha, do you want to take this?
Yeah, you can take that, Sujan.
Right.
I don't know. That's a good question.
So I'm So usually, again, this was not something I explicitly spoke to Mr. Megde about. However, he did hint at the fact that like new Dabbawalas who usually join, they are sort of in like an apprenticeship sort of like program where either they're acting as one of the spares on their team, or they're just like following and sort of like learning the ropes along the way. They do have a lot of scrutiny on sort of their performance and stuff. And as I said, again, they are very strict about sort of who they keep in the system and who they don't, as long as they're adhering to their sort of values of their moral values and their standards, and sort of, adhering to all of their rules. They're good. But then if they have infractions, very often they pretty much be like, oh, I'm sorry, you're out. And that's that.
Great. I remuted Sujan just because he had some crosstalk coming through his microphone. I didn't want to interrupt your response, but let's go over to Chelsea and see if I can get her. Oh, she's in here twice, so we'll see which one works. Chelsea, is that working, Chelsea? All right, let me try the other mic. Chelsea.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Yep.
Sorry
You're
about that.
live with Neha and Dhiraj.
Hi, Chelsea.
Hi, thank you guys so much for this talk. It's been really, really interesting, and I really appreciate it. So how did you learn about all of the intricacies? Did you do first-person interviews? Did you shadow them? You kind of alluded to talking to a few people, but I was curious about the process that went behind this.
Yeah, we did a combination of primary and secondary research. So secondary, we can send the registrants an email later with some resources. There's a really great Harvard, business review case study on them. And they've been studied by a lot of different, reputable institutions, mostly from like a management, business, and kind of supply chain perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And then also in terms of primary research, that was all Dhiraj, to be honest. So we happened to both be in India at the same time in December. And we had big plans of both of us following a Dabbawala for a day. Unfortunately, there's other political things happening in India at the time, which prevented us from being able to do that. But Dhiraj, you were amazing. And he reached out to Mr. Megde. He texts him constantly now, questions. Obviously, he talks to his friends. So, yeah, that's how we did it.
That's awesome.
That was, I actually wanted to point out something amazing about just the Dabbawala service in general, also because of that engagement. So initially, I reached out to all of my friends to try and see if any of them had subscribed to the service, and Nirali told me that she happened to be a subscriber of the Dabbawala service. So I was like, oh, great. Okay, tell me everything about it. And so I sat down with her. I learned like at least everything about like her experience with the service. And then I just asked her like, you know what, can you just give me the number of your Dabbawala so I can just like, call him and maybe just try to see if I can get an interview or something like that. So she sent me the number. And I called up. This is the Dabbawala that Nirali sort of talks to every day, and who's the one who like comes and picks up our food, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I called him up, and I'm like, I'm trying to do this talk, and is there a way we could meet, and or just if you could do a small interview and stuff. So the interview gets set up, and it turns out that I end up talking to the former president of their trust, and it's amazing because it goes down to the whole core concept of like anyone in management is just there for sort of like the governance part of it. Everybody is still a Dabbawala, and everybody is still doing deliveries and talking to customers and stuff like that. So it just so happened that Mr. Megde, who's actually like sort of almost like the face of the Mumbai Dabbawalas, he goes out, gives a lot of talks across the world. He's gone to like Switzerland and other places, spoken to like management students and stuff. And so just so happens that he was also Nirali's Dabbawala. So I ended up somehow having a conversation with him, and then he told me all about everything that we told you today.
That's
Wow.
incredible. Thank you for sharing that. That is so cool.
Thank you for your question, Chelsea. Dhiraj, I'm having flashbacks to your graduate thesis because I remember there was a very important part in your graduate thesis when you started talking about your research plan, and his thesis was about building a better system for people to group buy tickets for concerts. And he said, so I went down to the concert venue to a Guns N' Roses show, and I started just interviewing people. And he's showing pictures of him just tackling people in the parking lot at a Guns N' Roses concert, asking them questions about how they buy tickets in groups and things like that. And it's just, it was great. I think you might have been wearing a Guns N' Roses t-shirt at the presentation too.
I went to the concert as well. It was pretty good.
All right. I'm gonna mess up someone's name here, and I apologize in advance, but I think it's Sushama Gautam. So let me unmute Sushama and see. Sushama, you're unmuted. Can we hear you? Let's see.
Hi, everyone. Yeah,
Oh.
That's my name kind of right. It's Shushant. Yeah. So yeah, I just had a question, like out of curiosity. Are there any like provisions for the Dabbawalas after they retire? Like, how is their life after retirement? Do their kids join as Dabbawalas? Yeah, that's all I wanted to ask.
That is a very good question. So I do not know exactly about sort of what happens after one leaves the Dabbawala service. However, I can tell you that they have 2 trusts that they have set up. And these trusts are sort of there to help out. They have sort of a charitable trust, and they also have a commercial, sort of the commercial wing as well. So I'm guessing these might be helping out sort of take care of some of the Dabbawalas who have left their service. However, I think a lot of Dabbawalas still continue working sort of as long as they can. And again, it's just because they're probably not treating it as a job. It's, yeah, sure, it is a job. They get some money out of it. But because of the whole spiritual tie-in to that, maybe they don't retire. I don't know, but that's a very good question. That's definitely something which I could follow up on. And
research that,
yeah, we should definitely research that, and we could get back to you on that.
Sure. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shushama. Okay, we're going to go to Alex. Alex has a question. So let me, oh, look, he's at the top of my list. That's perfect. Alex, I think you're live. Why don't you try asking your question?
Hi, thank you, Neha and Dhiraj, for giving this talk. I was wondering if something were to happen, like if a Dabbawala gets a flat tire, do they have some sort of support network that they can use to coordinate getting it back up into play?
Yeah, you want
Neha, do you want to take
that, Dhiraj? Go ahead.
Okay, so as we said, on pretty much every part of their backstage touch points, they have contingency measures, in place. So all of these Dabbawalas do have cell phones with them. So if they do encounter any issue, if they're like, as you said, if they're stuck, they had a flat tire or they had an accident or something like that, one of the 5 reserved Dabbawalas of that team will be ready with their bicycles on call to like just come in there and assist this Dabbawala. So maybe they might just go in there and give him their bike and take the broken bike back to get it serviced. Or they might just go in and maybe share the load of the Dabbas as well, and then help this person sort of make up for the lost time in delivery or picking up all of the Dabbas and stuff. So basically they do have sort of like contingency measures built in at almost like every touch point, which is very impressive. And that's partly, I think, what is responsible for their timeliness and the fact that they have such a low error rate.
That's great. Thank you, Alex, for that question. The last question on the list is from Christine, but it's more of the same observation that we've been making, that this unwavering dedication to their mission is just impressive and a lesson to all of us. So I think we're at 4:15, but I do have a couple of questions that I was scratching down. So I do get time to ask questions if none show up in the question list. So I think the first question I have is, and I may have missed this, Dhiraj, when you were walking through the workflow, but like the tiffins, are the tiffins delivered back to their homes by the Dabbawalas? And when you were showing the code, I didn't see, like, how do they know whose house it goes to? Do they just know this looks like such and such's box, or is there some other way that they can figure that out?
I mean, honestly, a lot of it is just rote learning.
Yeah.
They just know, like they've done that, they've gone through that same route, they've looked at that dabba. They associate the dabba with the person. They know who the individual is, who the face behind that dabba is. Um, Although like some people, just for like I guess an extra precaution, they'll put like a label with the name of the person on it as well. But these Dabbawalas purely just rely on memory. Like,
Wow.
sure, they might have a majority illiterate workforce, but they are sharp. They know all the routes. They know exactly which floor and which person that dabba belongs to. It's almost like a face for them. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's how they use the code, just to like skirt around some of those sort of, I would say, hurdles of not being able to read or something like that. So they employ colors and symbols and just things that they can make correlations to. But when it comes to knowing who the dabba belongs to, it's because every day they just know, and it's almost like muscle memory, I guess, for them.
Wow. That's amazing. And I guess I have a bunch of questions here, but I think we've kind of hit them. My last question is, you didn't really talk about how much this costs.
Yeah.
Like, is it, what does the pricing structure look like for something like this?
Yeah, I think Dhiraj, you were saying you could opt in to pay like every other week or once a month, but it amounts to what, like, is it something like 1,500 to 3,000 rupees or something like that? It's really, really cheap, which is, Dhiraj helped me out. What is that in dollars?
It's like $16 to $24, I think, a month or something like that.
A month, yeah.
So not too much. And yeah, it's almost, they are almost like undercharging for their service. But again, you can like opt in either, you can either opt in for like a full delivery cycle wherein they deliver it to your house and they deliver it back, or you could opt in for just half a cycle. And interestingly enough, Nirali has applied for just half of the cycle. So she gets her dabba delivered to her office, and then she just carries the empty dabba home with her. Also, the price kind of varies depending on the distance that the dabba has to travel. So if somebody's like living really far away and traveling from like a very far away station, naturally their cost will be more expensive as opposed to somebody who's like maybe just like a couple of stops away or something like that. So they'd probably pay a little less.
Wow.
And then again, if you want the full cycle, you want the half cycle, all of that sort of comes into play.
So is it, are they earning a living wage, or is it a fairly low wage position for all the Dabbawalas?
Yeah, I would say it's a fairly low wage, and they are aware of that. Mr. Megde said himself too that whatever the money that they make through their service, it's definitely not enough to sustain the Dabbawalas, and that's why they sort of engage in all of these speaking opportunities. And they really do sort of, they engage in a lot of speaking activities. They speak at some of the most premier management institutes in India. They also go abroad and speak to like a lot of companies, share their expertise. A lot of companies come in to study with them as well and learn about their process. Like we wanted to throw this in there as well, but like famous people like, when Prince Charles made his first maiden visit to India, he came and he spent a day with these Dabbawalas, and he just fell in love with their work ethic, their discipline. He even invited like a contingent of them to his wedding. And they visited with like a sari that they had as a gift to them, and they have a very interesting connection with the royal family too. Like even when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were married recently, they sent them like a wedding gift and all that also. I think even Sir Richard Branson came in and spent a day with the Dabbawalas just to like learn about their service, and he too was just like enamored by their sort of efficiency, work ethic.
I mean, what a great note to end on. There's just so much to learn from from this, and I think I just want to thank you and commend you for taking something that's so just such a fascinating cultural story and such a great analog to service design to help us understand a lot more about service design and even describe this front of the house, back of the house thing. I can't think of a better of a better thing to refer to for all of that. So. I mean, with that said, thank you everyone who joined. I'm going to embarrass Dhiraj and Neha and point out that I think they have some family members who actually dialed in to listen to this. So if they're still
Hi, Mom.
connected, if they're still connected, I hope they're proud of you two for putting together such a great talk and for you being so excited and passionate about it. I learned so much, and I know everyone else, especially from the end of the feed coming through on chat and the Q&A and stuff like that. This has been great. So. Hey, for those of you who are still on, we'd love your feedback. So there's a feedback form that's posted here, and that'll also come through in an email that we're going to share to anyone who registered for the talk. The email is also going to contain links to how you can help the Dabbawalas during this COVID-19 crisis and some of the resources that Neha and Dhiraj tapped into to put this talk together. If we're offering after these webinars virtual coffees with the speakers, so if you want to have schedule some time to just chat with Neha and Dhiraj about how they put this talk together, about service design, or I don't know, how they're holding up under COVID-19 quarantine or whatever. What's that?
It should have been a virtual chai, not a virtual.
Oh, it should have been virtual chai. Oh,
right.
Man, lost
Missed
opportunity.
opportunity, Phil.
Man, okay. Next time. And then we have both of these two content strategy things coming up. Actually, the workshop, if you go to sign up for that, we are putting together a waiting list for that because it is sold out, but we may have to tap into the waiting list if folks need to back out. And then a week after that, the Design for Cognitive Bias talk. So thank you everyone for attending, and thank you especially Neha and Dhiraj for putting this great talk together. I hope you do this again. This was just this is wonderful.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. We had a lot of fun putting this together too. So we're glad we could share this information with you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.